Hi everyone, and welcome to Return to the River, a program about life along the banks of the historic Hudson River Valley. I'm your host, Chris Bowser. In 1986, a local TV show called On the River was produced by what was then WTZA Channel 62 in Kingston, New York. The show documented life along the river and covered such topics as industrial polluters, the sloop Clearwater, the state of recreation and commercial fishing, and waterfront preservation and development. In all, 153 episodes were produced. Today, through the generous donation of its original producers, the shows reside in the Marist College archives and special collections. The concept of Return to the River is to revisit many of the topics covered by the original series and to see how life along the Hudson has changed over the last 25 years, what policies helped in its preservation, and what work still needs to be done. We'll take a look at everything, from the variety of fish that inhabit its waters to the numerous historic landmarks that line its banks. The Hudson River is one of the most unique and diverse bodies of water in the world, and we still have much to learn about it. So I hope you'll join us for Return to the River. Question: what is the location of America's oldest public historic site? Boston? Virginia? Well, if you said Newburgh, New York, you would be correct. Washington's headquarters historic site is the oldest public historic site in the United States. To learn more about this fascinating place, I've asked my good friend Colonel Jim Johnson to give us a tour.
But first, let's take a quick look at a segment from the original On the River series.
Within the city of Newburgh, on 6.5 acres of land, one can absorb a part of American history. Bordering the banks of the Hudson River are the headquarters General Washington used during the Revolutionary War. There are a variety of exhibits to see at this state historic site. Among the displays upstairs in the museum building is a recreation of an 18th century kitchen and a gold watch once owned by the nation's First Lady, Martha Washington. Everything from George Washington's eyeglasses to a pair of boots worn by American soldiers can be seen in this room, and Tom says there's a reason this collection is one of the largest in the state.
The museum is here since 1910 because the collection has grown so much, especially in the second half of the 19th century. It just so happens that this property is the first public historic site or public history museum in the country, opening in 1850 before Mount Vernon, the Smithsonian, anything. So what that does is just give us this big collection. The kinds of things that we have in here are examples of articles which have been in our collection for 100 years or more.
Chris, thanks very much. It's really exciting to be here at Washington's headquarters with the site manager, Elise Goldberg. I am Colonel Jim Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Hudson River Valley Institute at Marist College. I'm the Dr. Frank T. Bumpus Chair in Hudson River Valley History and the Military Historian for the Hudson River Valley National Heritage Area. It's great to be with you, Elise. This is a great site. In fact, this is a flagship site.
It is. It's the first publicly owned historic site in the nation, opened in 1850.
Why do you think that citizens decided this was worth saving?
A lot of things happened here, especially during Washington's time, that were very important to the war effort. And as you say, the location is important because when Washington was here, he could look directly across the river to see the beacon, what's now Mount Beacon, where the signal fires were. And he can hear in a very short time if there is any movement in New York or in the lower Hudson Valley. Remember, at the time that Washington was here, New York was occupied by the British. So it was still very important to make sure that the colonists had the control of the Hudson River. And they didn't want to lose that control. So Washington was here, and his troops were cantoned over in New Windsor, about 6 miles away. There were more than 7,000 troops over there, and he was headquartered here. The things he did here were important then and important still. He created the Badge of Military Merit, which later became the Purple Heart that we know today, that was started in the headquarters building here. He also wrote the Newburgh Address, which was an important milestone in the pivotal point in history that a lot of people don't know about. You know
So it
about.
established civil-military relations.
Yes, it did.
Essentially,
Yes.
Washington recognized that he, as the leader, commander-in-chief of the Continental Army, was subservient to the Continental Congress. That was really important.
Correct, and a lot of the officers were a bit disgruntled and were questioning that. And he settled that with them by writing the address that he read to them here. The other piece that's sort of very interesting that I found out since I've been here is that this is where he actually disbanded the army. Not many countries do that. At the end of the war, they say, okay, we don't want a standing army. That's not how we want it to be. We're going to dissolve and disband the army. And I don't know if anyone had done that before. So that was another first that Washington did from here.
Well, you also share ownership with New Windsor Cantonment, the National Purple Heart Hall of Honor of the original, one of the 3 original badges of military merit.
Yes.
There's lore even, and then you can either continue this as lore or dispute it factually, that even Martha may have helped sew that original badge of military merit.
We know that the description of what it should look like was from here. And we know that Martha was here. So deduce what you'd like, but we don't have anything to document that.
I like it. I like the idea of watching her sew that badge of military merit that was being given to enlisted soldiers
Right,
for
it was
doing
the first-
extraordinary.
Right, and it was the
things.
first award to enlisted soldiers at that time anywhere. And we know of 3 that were given out, and they were called to headquarters to receive it. And one of them is actually at the National Purple Heart Hall of Honor in New Windsor.
The other thing about this site is the centerpiece is a historic house. And it seems to me that people calculated how important this was, not only because of Washington's heritage and influence, but also for the house itself.
Well, the house was built in 1750 by Jonathan Hasbrook. He lived here with his wife Trenja, and they were here. Jonathan is a descendant of the Huguenots from Huguenot Street in New Paltz, from Abraham Hasbrook. And they owned the house, and they actually believed in the rebel cause of the Revolution. And when Washington was looking through the area, he felt that this was a good house for him to rent. He rented it from Trenja Hadrick, who at that point was a widow. And she decided that it was too much for her to live in the house with the Washingtons and his staff, because they really took over the house. There were up to 20 people living in the house at one time. Business of the army had to be done. We had visitors, they had merchants, they had everybody.
Quartermasters, I presume, were coming here with their invoice.
Everybody was coming through. They were greeted in the house. Martha had to entertain in the house.
Even foreign dignitaries,
Foreign
like French
dignitaries.
officers.
Yes, they all came. They stayed in the house sometimes. The local community came here as a resource when they needed something, because again, the country was in war. So there were needs of the local community, and they came here to get those resolved as well.
I was here with a committee in December of 1999, and we met upstairs, and it was still a little rough. I mean, it wasn't restored.
Right.
And we started in that meeting the Washington Rochambeau National Historic Trail. And coming back here today, you can see how much this building has been restored
Right,
and upgraded.
Right, we're very grateful that we were able to get this building, the museum building, renovated and brought up to current standards so that we can have humidity and temperature, a little more control, and more objects that are sensitive, because things like textiles are very hard to maintain, and they're light sensitivity and temperature sensitive. And with the restoration of this building, the renovations, we're able to show more objects than we could before.
Right.
So it's a wonderful thing that the state of New York and the Palisades State Park Commission made that kind of investment, especially during these economic times, into this site. It's definitely a stamp of approval on that. We have an electronic catalog where you can look up any of the objects on view and find out more about them, see their image close up, You can magnify it. You can look at alternate views of that object. So for example, if you were looking at a decorative plate that was from the period, you might be able to see the back and see the maker's marks, which you couldn't see if it was just stationary in a display.
Particularly since you can't pick it
You
up.
can't pick it up. So we've shown you the other side virtually. So it's a really exciting way to look at the information. It's also an opportunity to, with less labeling and interpretation in the galleries, we could spread out more objects because we don't have to waste all of that space. So it's a great opportunity to use technology to actually make the collection more accessible to people.
So someone who saw that original program has not been here in 25 years is going to be astounded when they walk in this building and see the change that has happened for the better here in terms of the ability to show artifacts and all the important objects of history. So I think that that's important. I think the other thing that is new is you have a Liberty Tree.
We do. That came to the site a couple of years ago, and it's an interesting story. During the Revolution, each town would have some sort of either what they called the Liberty Trees or Liberty Poles that they would hang a ribbon on to say that there was a meeting. It was like a secret message that people could see that there was a meeting that night in the tavern, or they'd be gathering under the tree to have rebel discussions and planning. And they were known as Liberty Trees and Liberty Poles, and they were up and down the colonies. And the British found out about some of them, and they were cut down or burned, and over the years they fell. The last one was in Annapolis, Maryland, and the American Forests and the Providence Forum decided to get saplings from that tree, the last remaining Liberty Tree, and they planted one tree in each of the original 13 colonies. And New York's Liberty Tree is here at Washington's headquarters.
So what happens when a visitor comes to the site? What do you think they're going to really be drawn to when they walk up to the desk and say, wow, we're at Washington's headquarters, what you got for us?
I think they will be pleasantly surprised at the impact that this site has. It may not be the biggest site in the world, or the most expensive, or the most prestigious. But what they find here is an incredible experience they can't get anywhere else. As they walk through the house that Washington lived in, the floorboards that Washington walked on.
The other thing that has struck me, I'm on a committee trying to help you restore the Tower of Victory.
Yes, the Tower of Victory.
Why should we do that? I mean, why is it important that we remember this?
Well, it was, first of all, the government felt it was an important thing to put up. The Secretary of War at the time, who was none other than Robert Todd Lincoln, thought it was really important. He was in charge of coordinating it. A local designer, Louis Beach, was in charge of getting all the designs and the contracts and all that together. He got it, John Hemingway Duncan, to design the tower.
Very famous.
Yes, he did Grant's Tomb in New York and the Grand Army Plaza Arch in Brooklyn. He did those.
So this is a significant piece of architecture.
In terms of architecture and art, it's wonderful. The sculptures in there that are done by O'Donovan. The life-size statue of Washington is said to be one of the closest likenesses. They felt it was very important to put up, and it is a monument to the peaceful end of the war that happened from here. It was built and erected in 1887, and over the years, it has had some, it's fallen into disrepair.
And a hurricane helped that.
In the 50s, the hurricane damaged the roof, which ultimately had to be removed. So it was taken from the observation level down, pretty much a skin was put over that. The roof was taken off, a skin was put over it as a temporary measure to protect it.
And it wasn't good enough because the water damage has really made your
Yes.
maintenance and preservation tasks difficult.
Yes, and Superstorm Sandy just last year kicked a little bit further into disrepair. We lost
You even lost a
lost
gate.
one of the gates, which is now, thanks to some FEMA money, is being restored. We've been working on this campaign that you know for over a year. We're about 2/3 the way to getting the funds to restore the tower and the roof. And not only will it be great to have the tower back, but it's been so long since there's been a roof on it that a lot of people don't know there ever was a different roof
Did
on
you
it.
see your little exhibit with the terracotta tiles that
Right.
used to be there? Which is a little strange, I would have to
Yes,
admit.
and there was a little controversy when it was built, but it is what it is, and we're grateful
And it was
to
what it
have
was.
Yes, but if you see images of the site around, a lot of the images of the tower have the rounded roof that it has now, and I don't want people to think that that's the tower.
Right.
That's only part of the tower. So we have to change that image and make sure that the new generation gets to see what it was really supposed to be.
So Chris, when people come back here 25 years from now, we hope that they will enjoy the restoration work that was done here in this building, and we hope they'll be able to see a completed tower, the Tower of Victory, that will look like to them what it once looked like. Elise,
Yes.
last words, ma'am.
I'm very proud to be associated with this site and with the Palisades Interstate Park Commission and New York State Parks and Rec and Historic Preservation. They do a wonderful job, and this is a very important site, and I think that it's important to not only the people of Newburgh, but the people of New York State and of this nation. And everyone should make it a priority to come down and see it.
Well, I salute you. We citizens of New York and America appreciate what you do here. We know how important this site is. And so for all of us, hip hip huzzah.
Huzzah.
More ahead on Return to the River. The Atlantic sturgeon is the largest fish in the Hudson River, but even giants have to start out small. My name is Chris Bowser, and I'm here at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York, on the banks of the Hudson River, with a sadly deceased but still incredibly interesting example of a juvenile Atlantic sturgeon. This is a fish that was probably born here in the Hudson River, not far from Marist College, just a few months ago this spring. And here in August, it's about 6 or 7 inches long. But if it had lived and matured and lived a long, full life, it might have reached 8 or 10 or even a dozen feet long. Sturgeon are anadromous fish. What that means is they're born in freshwater, and the Hudson River here, 80 miles from New York Harbor, is freshwater. But the Hudson's also an estuary with a direct connection to the sea. So this little sturgeon was probably trying to make its way back to the ocean, where it would live for years and years and years and mature before finally, hopefully someday, returning to freshwater to spawn. So that's what an anadromous fish is. It's a fish that spends part of its life in freshwater, part of its life in saltwater. Now the sturgeon has some remarkable adaptations, some remarkable things that it has to help it survive. One of the most visible things are these rows of bony plates called scutes. And there's a nice sharp row here on the top, but there's also rows along the side and bottom of the fish as well. And on this individual, they're razor sharp like teeth. And they obviously offer terrific protection for the fish. Sturgeon are interesting in that they have a lot of shark-like qualities and a lot of traditional bony fish qualities. If you look at their tail, the top part of their tail is much longer than the bottom part of their tail, almost like a shark. And in fact, if you were to look at the skeleton of the sturgeon, there's a lot of cartilage in that skeleton, just like sharks and their relatives. But there's also bone in here, and it shares a lot of traits with bony fish that we're more familiar with. This general body plan, the sturgeon family of fish, have been around for over 200 million years. That means when dinosaurs were out thumping around on land, sturgeon were cruising their way through the shallow seas and estuaries. Just an incredible animal. When we look at the underside of the head of the sturgeon, we can see some more amazing things. First of all, you can see that the sturgeon head is very, very flat on the bottom. And if you notice this mouth here can actually extend out like a tube, like a vacuum cleaner. And in fact, the sturgeon is a bottom feeder. It's hard to see, but it has very small whiskers called barbels on its nose here that it uses to sense prey in the water. When it finds something to eat, some bottom-dwelling animal, that mouth comes in, slurps that right up like a vacuum cleaner. So they're bottom feeders. They're not dangerous to people. They're not going to bite swimmers or fishermen or anything like that. But if you do catch one, a big animal is always a risk to try and take into a boat. So really, throughout this country, you probably shouldn't be going fishing for sturgeon. Many species of sturgeon are endangered worldwide, and it's an animal that we're trying very, very hard to conserve. That's why seeing a dead one like this is very sad in some ways, but it also gives us a remarkable chance to examine this fish up close and personal. That's the Atlantic sturgeon on the banks of the Hudson River in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Well, that's our show. We hope you enjoyed it. Join us next time as we examine species of fish, visit historic sites, and explore all that the Hudson River Valley has to offer. See you next time on Return to the River.